In today's video, we are going to be doing a side-by-side comparison of the Pioneer DJ DDJ-FLX or Flex 4 and comparing that to the predecessor, which was, of course, the Pioneer DJ DDJ-400. I'm going to be covering off the similarities, some of the differences, and also as well giving you my thoughts on if I feel that the FLX4 is a worthwhile upgrade from the DDJ-400. This is a follow-on video from the unboxing and what's in the box video I did just recently of the FLX4, so if you want to see that, do check that out in the video description down below. But for now, let's get straight into it. So here we have both the units sat next to each other side by side, and on first glance it doesn't appear that there is a lot of difference between them. Yes, there are a couple of aesthetic differences. For example, the DDJ-400, which is here on the left, has a little bit more of an angular feel in terms of the corners, whereas the FLX4 has this more rounded appearance. And in terms of the overall color scheme of the two units, it doesn't show that much on camera, but the DDJ-400 does have a complete sort of jet black appearance, and the FLX4 does have more of a charcoal grey finish in colour, but on the whole they look pretty similar sort of at first glance. In terms of connectivity, both units feature an 1/8 inch jack headphone input located on the front. In terms of the back of the unit's connectivity is again rather similar. There is fairly limited connectivity with only RCA outputs for connecting up your speakers, and also a jack input for the microphone and an attenuation switch on both units. The one on the right hand side is the FLX4, the one on the left is the DDJ-400. Now, the microphone I will talk in a little bit more detail later in this video, because there are actually some great software options and a little bit more control on the FLX4 in comparison to the DDJ-400. The biggest change in connectivity actually comes from the FLX4 in terms of USB connectivity, which now features USB-C versus the traditional kind of old school USB style that featured on the DDJ-400. Now, both units do not require you to power the devices by hooking up to a mains power supply. However, with the FLX4 you are now granted that option. You can plug in a USB-C and then connect a power brick. I think that this will be most useful if you are connecting your mobile phone and using the Rekordbox app to DJ, something that you cannot do on the DDJ-400. So it's a nice addition, but in most cases, if you are DJing with your laptop, you probably won't need to use this at all. In terms of the overall finish, both units, the DDJ-400 and FLX4, have an entirely plastic construction. To be quite honest, at this price point and this being Pioneer DJ, I wouldn't expect any kind of metal finish at all. Nevertheless, both units feel pretty sturdy and pretty well built. However, perhaps not the most rugged if being used in a professional club environment. So it is something to bear in mind, but at the same time, at this entry-level price point, you really can't expect anything else. In terms of the decks themselves, both the DDJ-400, which is on screen right now, and then the FLX4 come with Pioneer DJ's kind of industry standard layout. So if the eventual aim of you as a DJ is to move up to more advanced controllers and CDJs, you will not have a huge amount of trouble adjusting to something a little bit more elaborate later on. You can see at the top of both the units, you've got your loop buttons, the in and out loop, which would be nice if it would stay in focus. So we've got the in and out loop buttons, the loop call buttons, and also the master sync mode. Both have the same size jog wheels. I think these are 4.5 inch jog wheels, which feel pretty good to the touch. The FLX4 certainly has a bit more of a matte feel in terms of the top surface versus this kind of more slippery feel on the DDJ-400, and the tension is pretty similar between both of them. At the bottom here, you've got your standard play, pause and cue buttons, and also as well, you've got your 8 effects buttons as well. So these trigger things like hop cues, beat jumps, beat loops, and it's exactly the same on the FLX4. The pitch slider as well is Pretty short, however, it does a pretty good job in controlling the speed of the track. It seems pretty accurate, and they are also both exactly the same in length. So not a lot of differences there comparing the two deck sections. In terms of the pads themselves, they feel soft to the touch, and they also activate with a small click. This is exactly the same on the FLX4 as well. But they feel pretty good underhand, and in terms of testing them, they feel pretty responsive as well. Onto the mixer section, and this is where we start to see a couple of differences. Both feature a 2-channel mixer with 3-band EQ. However, one thing that the FLX4 has over the DDJ-400 is it now has an additional mic level knob actually on the face of the mixer. Beforehand, on the DDJ-400, as you can see here, it is missing, and you do have to control the mic level using the attenuation switch which appears on the back of the unit. The DDJ-FLX4 actually has both, so it has the mic level on the actual face of the panel, and it has an attenuation switch or dial on the back of the device as well. However, the most impressive microphone features actually appear in the software. So once we jump onto the software, I will show you those options. Other noticeable upgrades or changes when they release the FLX4 is this additional button which activates the smart fader feature. More on that to follow. As you can see on the DDJ-400, that is missing, so it's a brand new feature. And the filter knobs on the DDJ-400 have now been changed into CFX knobs, and there is the additional smart CFX which activates one of 8 different sort of multi-layered effects. More on that to follow when we jump onto the software. Everything else is pretty much in the same location. The only other additions that I would like to mention at this point is that the FLX4 does feature Bluetooth connectivity, as you can see at the top here, whereas the DDJ-400 didn't. But apart from that, in terms of overall look and feel, they both have pretty similar layouts. They both have pretty similar features. There are just a few additions, a few upgrades which the FLX4 has. So here in the Rekordbox software, you'll recall that I mentioned the fact that the FLX4 actually has some advanced microphone features. So in the settings here, you'll notice that if we scroll down to the bottom, if we go to controller and then mixer, we can actually have 2 different inputs. So we've got an effect mode on the microphone input or a low latency mode. The effect mode may produce a little bit of delay when talking on the mic, so it will come out of the master a little bit later, but it is still pretty cool. And you can also have advanced or normal talk over modes and set the level. Now, if you come out of this menu and select the mixer, the mixer panel on the top of the menu here, you'll notice that you've then got these mic controls that appear below the left deck, and this is where things are definitely a drastic improvement compared to the DDJ-400, because we can now control the EQ in terms of 3-band EQ on the microphone, so low, mid and high, which is lovely. You can then even add some effects. There are only 3 of them, but you can then add some effects onto your voice on the microphone if you have the effect mode enabled from the settings. So you've got echo, a reverb and a pitch, and then you can alter the intensity of that particular effect. Now, in terms of some of these, I think reverb is probably going to be the most useful. Pitch is probably a bit more of a gimmicky one because it will make you sound a little bit squeaky or a little bit like a robot if you adjust it down. But still fun to see that on there. And then also as well, you can set the talk over mode as well. So you can either have a heavy feedback reducer or light feedback reducer. So depending on what environment you're in, especially if you're close to speakers or perhaps performing right in front of some speakers, hopefully that might help because it will reduce the feedback. But I think for a controller at this price point, yes, these are software driven features. However, I do think this is a pretty good addition and pretty comprehensive. In terms of the smart fader feature, which is activated using this button here, this applies some tempo adjustment, some low EQ adjustment, and also volume adjustment when you are blending tracks together. And this applies to both the crossfader and also as well the up faders, which is great to see. Initially, I did think it was another way just to activate beat sync, but it does do all of those other things. And also on the exiting track, it applies like a little echo out. Now, in order to get the most out of this feature, you will have to use Rekordbox. So for this particular example, we're going to have one track at 126 BPM, and we're going to be going up in speed to 130 BPM. So you can see on screen the left track. Let's just imagine that that is playing out to the crowd. That is 126 BPM, and the next track that I'm bringing in on the right hand deck is set at 130 BPM. Now, as soon as I activate the smart fader, you'll notice that the track on the right hand side on the right deck goes instantly down to 126 BPM. Now, as I start to move the crossfader across into to bring in this second track, you'll see that the tempos will adjust on both of the tracks. So because we've got to go up essentially 4 BPM by the midpoint, so when the crossfader is at the midpoint, both the tracks will be playing out at 128 BPM, and then as we transition across to the right hand deck, that's where we get to eventually both the tracks playing at 130 BPM, and then that is the transition complete. And you can imagine as well that on the left hand deck there would be an echo out also being applied, but also you will also hear a low EQ adjustment during that mix. I can't really play it because I will get hit for copyright on the channel, but you can see on screen that is how it works, and it works similarly in the reverse. So if you were going from left to right, you can see the tempo adjust on screen as well. Finally, and what I think is the coolest addition to the DDJ-FLX4 that you will not find on the DDJ400 are these smart color effects, or smart CFX, activated using this button here. Now, once again, if you're using Rekordbox, you are going to have access to more of these. In fact, 8 in total compared with only 2 in Serato DJ Lite. Unfortunately, that is just one of the limitations of using Serato. In order to access the list of the 8, you hold down the shift button, which is found to the left of the unit, and then click through using the smart CFX. So the 8 which you can see on screen are Phantom Echo, Reflect Echo, Morbius Echo, Vaporize, Noise Chopper, Cyberjet, Cyberpitch, and Twister. Now, in terms of how these work, it's effectively like a layering of several different effects to kind of create an overall effect. Some of them are going to be more to your taste than others. I do think some of them are a little bit gimmicky, but nevertheless they are a fun feature and can certainly add a lot of creativity to your mixes. So what I'll do now is I will show you a few of these effects, and just so that you can kind of get an idea of what they sound like should you wish to buy this unit. So we're going to start off with the Phantom Echo. Okay, next up we've got our Reflect Echo. Morbius Echo. Vaporize. Noise Chopper. Cyberjet. Cyberpitch. and then finally twister. So there we have it, some pretty cool effects, but as I said, I'm using Rekordbox for this. If you're using Serato, especially Serato DJ Lite, you will only have access to 2 smart color effects. I believe in the Pro version you will have access to a greater number. So there we have it, a little side-by-side comparison of the DDJ-400 and DDJ-FLX4. Both fantastic units, of course, the FLX4 being a little bit newer, hence some of those feature advancements. And in terms of answering the question of if you have a DDJ-400, should you upgrade to an FLX4? In my opinion, the answer is no. If you are ready and you are looking to upgrade your equipment, you are probably looking to buy something a little bit more advanced than an FLX4. This is still an entry-level budget controller at its heart. So if you've got a DDJ-400, your next step is something a little bit more intermediate or advanced, whether that be the DDJ-800, 1000, something along those lines, I think personally would be a better investment for you. The FLX4 is still that entry-level controller and is great for your first step into the world of DJing. Hope you've liked this video, hope you found it useful. If you have got any questions, please let me know in the comments down below, of course, and I will see you in the next video.